Imagine standing on a busy street corner in Los Angeles, surrounded by the comforting glow of streetlights and the distant hum of traffic. It is 2012, and the city feels alive, electric, and full of infinite possibilities for a young person chasing a dream. You check your phone, seeing it is just past midnight, and decide that a quick shortcut through a quiet alleyway will shave 10 minutes off your walk home. As you step into the shadows, the noise of the city instantly fades into an eerie silence, and the hair on the back of your neck stands up because you suddenly realize you are not alone. Before we dive into this terrifying story of a disappearance that baffled the LAPD and terrified a local community, I have a small request. If you enjoy strange, dark, and mysterious stories delivered in a storytelling format, please gently tap the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us out and ensures you never miss a new case. Now, let's get into today's story, which takes us back to the warm, seemingly innocent autumn of 2012 inches, the heart of Southern California, where a young woman's bright future was about to be extinguished. Maya was a vibrant 23-year-old graphic designer who had moved to Los Angeles from a small town in the Midwest. Fueled by ambition and optimism, she was the kind of person who lit up a room the moment she walked in. Known for her infectious laugh and her inability to say no to a friend in need, she had secured a modest apartment in a bustling neighborhood that was considered up-and-coming, where trendy cafes sat right next to older, grittier buildings. She loved the energy of the city and told her parents back home that she finally felt like she belonged. Her daily routine was clockwork, a comforting pattern that her friends and family would later analyze with heartbreaking scrutiny. Every morning, Maya would grab an iced coffee from the shop on the corner, wave to the barista, and catch the bus to her design firm in Santa Monica. She was responsible, careful, and street smart enough to know which streets to avoid after dark. Her apartment complex was a gated building with a security code, giving her a sense of safety that would unfortunately prove to be an illusion. Life was going perfectly until one crisp Friday evening in November changed everything forever. It was November 16th, 2012. A Friday night that buzzed with the anticipation of the weekend. Maya had made plans to meet two of her closest friends, Jessica and Liam, for a celebratory dinner at a popular Mexican restaurant a few miles from her apartment. She had just received a promotion at work, a milestone she had been working toward for months. "I'm wearing the red dress, so you better not be late," she joked over the phone to Jessica while getting ready in her bathroom. She looked at her reflection, smiling, completely unaware that this was the last time she would ever see her own face. The dinner was filled with laughter, margaritas, and endless talk about the future, the kind of night you wish would never end. Witnesses later recalled seeing the group in high spirits, with Maya being the center of attention as she recounted funny stories from her office. They stayed at the restaurant until it closed, then decided to move to a nearby lounge to continue the celebration. By the time 1:00 a.m. rolled around, the group was tired but happy. Maya, however, she started to feel the effects of a long week and told her friends, "I think I'm gonna call it a night." Guys, Jessica and Liam immediately offered to share a cab with her or drive her home, but Maya waved them off with a confident smile. She explained that she was only about 8 blocks away and that the fresh air would do her good after being inside all day. "It's a straight shot down the main boulevard. I'll be totally fine," she insisted, giving them both a quick hug goodbye. It is a decision that thousands of people make every weekend in cities across the world without consequence. But on this specific night, under the hazy orange Los Angeles sky, that simple choice was fatal. Maya began her walk home, her heels clicking rhythmically against the concrete pavement as she navigated the thinning crowds. She texted her roommate, Chloe, at 1:15 a.m., a short message that simply read, "On my way back. Leave the light on." The main street was still relatively active with cars zooming past and stragglers leaving bars, which gave the environment a deceptive feeling of security. She plugged in her earphones to listen to music, a habit that many of us have, effectively cutting off her auditory awareness. As she walked, she didn't notice the dark sedan that had slowly pulled away from the curb behind her, about 4 blocks from her apartment. Maya reached a familiar intersection where the path diverged. She could continue along the well-lit, wider boulevard, or she could cut through a long, narrow service alley that ran behind a row of commercial businesses. This alley was a known shortcut for locals, shaving valuable minutes off the walk. But at night, it was a cavern of shadows. Perhaps she was just tired, or perhaps her feet hurt. But surveillance footage from a nearby ATM captured Maya pausing for a split second before turning left. She walked confidently into the darkness of the alley, disappearing from the camera's view. That grainy, black and white footage of Maya turning the corner is the last confirmed sighting of her alive. The alleyway was roughly 200 yards long, emerging onto the street where her apartment complex stood. It should have taken her less than 3 minutes to traverse the length of it. However, 1:30 a.m. came and went, and Maya never walked out of the other side. Her roommate, Chloe, fell asleep on the couch waiting for the sound of the door unlocking. The morning sun would soon rise over Los Angeles, illuminating a city that had swallowed Maya whole, leaving absolutely no trace behind. Chloe woke up to the harsh glare of the midday sun streaming through the living room blinds. Her neck stiff from sleeping at an awkward angle on the sofa, she blinked groggily, expecting to hear Maya moving around in the kitchen making their traditional Saturday morning pancakes. But the apartment was dead silent. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, and noticed that the front door was still locked from the inside, exactly how she had left it before falling asleep. A knot of unease began to form in her stomach as she walked to Maya's bedroom and pushed the door open, only to find the bed perfectly made and empty. She tried to rationalize the situation, telling herself that Maya must have crashed at Jessica's place, or perhaps met someone at the lounge and decided to stay out. It was a logical explanation for a young, single woman in the city. But it didn't sit right with Chloe because Maya was obsessively communicative. Maya was the type of person who would text if she was going to be 5 minutes late, let alone staying out all night. Chloe grabbed her phone and saw the text from 1:15 a.m. "On my way back. Leave the light on," which was now 12 hours old. With trembling fingers, she dialed Maya's number, pressing the phone tight against her ear as she paced the small living room. The call didn't even ring. It went straight to voicemail, indicating that the phone was either turned off or the battery had completely died. "Hey, it's Maya. Leave a message." The cheerful recording played, a stark contrast to the growing dread in the room. Chloe hung up and immediately dialed Jessica, praying that her friend would pick up and laugh about how they were all hung over at her place. But when Jessica answered, her voice was groggy and confused. "Not knowing where Maya was. What do you mean she's not home? She left hours before we did," Jessica said, her voice instantly shifting from sleepy to alarmed as the reality of the timeline sank in. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face as she explained that Maya's bed had not been slept in and her phone was dead. They quickly conferenced Liam into the call, and the silence on the other end was deafening when he realized they had let her walk alone. The group decided to meet immediately at the apartment, the carefree energy of the previous night replaced by a suffocating blanket of panic. When Liam and Jessica arrived 30 minutes later, the atmosphere in the apartment was heavy, charged with unspoken fears and the smell of stale coffee. They sat around the kitchen table, mapping out a plan, trying to convince themselves that there was a reasonable explanation for this disappearance. "Maybe she got hurt. Maybe she's in a hospital," Liam suggested, his voice cracking slightly as he grabbed his car keys. They decided to split up. Chloe would stay by the landline and call local hospitals, while Liam and Jessica would retrace Maya's walking route step by step. Liam and Jessica drove to the Mexican restaurant where they had started their night, parking the car and beginning the walk Maya would have taken. It was a bright, sunny Saturday afternoon, and the streets were filled with families and shoppers, making it hard to imagine anything bad happening here. They walked slowly, scanning the sidewalks for anything out of the ordinary, asking shop owners if they had seen a girl in a red dress. Most people just shook their heads or looked at them with pity, offering no useful information. As they walked, the distance between the bar and the apartment seemed terrifyingly short. They eventually reached the intersection where the main boulevard met the narrow service alley, the spot where Maya had made her fateful decision. "She takes this shortcut all the time," She says it saves 10 minutes, Jessica whispered, staring into the mouth of the alley, which looked significantly less threatening in the daylight. The ground was paved with uneven asphalt and lined with the back doors of businesses, dumpsters, and colorful graffiti. They stepped into the alley, the noise of the main street fading away, replaced by the sound of their own footsteps echoing off the brick walls. About halfway down the alley, near a large, rusted industrial dumpster, Liam stopped abruptly and grabbed Jessica's arm. He pointed to a small, glittering object resting in a patch of dirt near a drainage grate, almost invisible against the grime. He crouched down and picked it up carefully. It was a silver hoop earring with a distinct turquoise stone. Jessica gasped and covered her mouth with her hand because she recognized it immediately. That's Maya's. She was wearing those last night. She choked out, tears welling up in her eyes as the situation transformed from a missing person search to a potential crime scene. They rushed to the nearest police station, clutching the earring as if it were a lifeline, expecting the officers to immediately launch a massive search operation. However, they were met with the frustrating bureaucracy that often plagues missing persons cases involving adults. The officer at the desk listened politely, but explained that without evidence of foul play, adults are allowed to go missing if they choose to. She's 23. Maybe she just needed a break, the officer suggested, telling them to file a report but wait a full 24 hours before expecting significant action. The group left the station feeling helpless and angry, the sun beginning to set on a day that had started with confusion and ended with terror. They returned to Chloe's apartment, turning on every light in the house, as if the brightness could somehow guide Maya home. They printed out crude missing flyers on Chloe's home printer, taping Maya's smiling face onto standard paper. As they taped the first flyer to a telephone pole outside, the city of Los Angeles seemed to transform around them. It was no longer a city of dreams, but a labyrinth of dark corners where a young woman could vanish into thin air. Night fell again, bringing with it the same chilling darkness that had swallowed Maya 24 hours earlier. The friends sat in the living room, jumping at every car door, closing outside, and every creak of the floorboards. The discovery of the earring in the alley was the only tangible proof they had, a silent testament to a struggle or a fall, as the clock ticked past midnight, marking the first full day of her disappearance. The hope of a simple misunderstanding evaporated. Somewhere out there in the sprawling urban landscape, Maya was gone, and the nightmare was only just beginning. By Monday morning, 72 hours after Maya had vanished, the polite indifference of the initial police response had evaporated, replaced by a grim and urgent intensity. The case had been transferred to the Robbery Homicide Division, specifically to Detective Mark Miller, a veteran investigator who knew the darkest corners of Los Angeles better than anyone. He sat Chloe, Jessica, and Liam down in a sterile interview room, his face etched with a mixture of sympathy and hardened resolve. We found footage from a security camera behind an electronics store in the alley, Miller said, sliding a laptop around to face them. I need you to be strong, but I need you to confirm if this is her. The video file was grainy and black and white, time-stamped at 1:28 a.m. on that Friday night, showing the desolate stretch of the alleyway. The three friends leaned in, holding their breath as a figure walked into the frame, her gait unmistakable, even in the low resolution. It was Maya, walking with purpose, her head slightly bobbing as if she was listening to a favorite song, completely oblivious to her surroundings. Suddenly, a pair of headlights swept across the brick wall, illuminating her silhouette, and a dark sedan rolled slowly into the frame from the opposite end of the alley, blocking her path. The car stopped abruptly, and the driver's side door flew open with terrifying speed, releasing a tall, shadowed figure who lunged toward Maya before she even had time to scream. The struggle on the screen lasted less than 10 seconds. It was a blur of motion, a dropped bag, and a body being forcefully shoved into the back seat of the vehicle. Chloe let out a strangled sob and turned away, unable to watch her best friend being taken, while Liam stared at the screen in frozen horror, his fists clenched white. It happened so fast, Jessica whispered, tears streaming down her face. She didn't even have a chance to run. Detective Miller paused the video on a single frame just as the car was peeling away, zooming in on the rear of the vehicle to highlight a crucial detail. The license plate was obscured by dirt and the glare of the lights, but there was a distinct, large dent on the rear bumper and a unique sticker on the back window. "We can't read the plate yet, but that dent is a fingerprint for a car," Miller explained, his voice steady and commanding. "We have every patrol unit in the city looking for a late-model dark Honda Civic with rear-end damage. We are going to find this car." The investigation shifted instantly from a passive search to a high-stakes manhunt, with the media finally picking up the story and broadcasting Maya's photo across every news station. The city was on edge, the image of the alleyway abduction playing on a loop in the minds of every resident who walked home alone at night. Reports started flooding in from concerned citizens, most of them useless dead ends. But the police had to treat every single one as a potential break in the case. The friends were sent home with instructions to stay by their phones. But the waiting was a form of psychological torture they were ill-equipped to handle. Late that afternoon, a patrol officer in an industrial district 20 miles south of the abduction site radioed in a code that stopped everyone in the precinct in their tracks. He had spotted a vehicle matching the description, a dark Honda Civic with a crushed rear bumper parked behind a dilapidated, abandoned auto repair shop. The area was a ghost town of rusted metal and broken windows, the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. "I have visual on the vehicle. License plate matches a reported stolen," the officer whispered over the radio, requesting immediate backup. Within minutes, the silent industrial park was swarming with SWAT teams and unmarked police cruisers, approaching the building with weapons drawn and adrenaline pumping. Detective Miller arrived on the scene, donning a tactical vest, his heart pounding with the knowledge that every second counted if Maya was still alive inside. They established a perimeter, cutting off all escape routes, the air thick with the static of radios and the heavy silence of anticipation. "Breach on my count," the team leader signaled, and with a deafening crash, they rammed the reinforced steel door and flooded into the darkness. The inside of the warehouse was cavernous and smelled of oil, rot, and something metallic that made the officers' stomachs turn. They swept through the main floor, clearing corners and checking under tarps, their flashlights cutting through the dusty gloom. In the center of the room, there was a makeshift living area, a dirty mattress, a table covered in fast food wrappers, and a chair bolted to the floor. But it was what lay on the table that confirmed their worst fears. There, neatly arranged like a trophy, there was a red high-heeled shoe and a broken smartphone with a cracked screen. Clear, no suspect. "No, victim," a voice shouted from the back of the building, the words echoing off the hollow metal walls. Miller walked over to the table and picked up the red shoe with a gloved hand, his jaw tightening as he recognized it from the description Jessica had given him. Maya had been here, likely within the last few hours, but she had been moved again. The realization hit the team like a physical blow. They were chasing a ghost who was always one step ahead. The abductor was not just an opportunist, he was calculated, mobile, and playing a sick game of cat and mouse. As the forensic team began to scour the warehouse for DNA and fingerprints, Miller stepped outside to make the call he had been dreading. He dialed Chloe's number, hearing the desperate hope in her voice the moment she answered. "We found the car, and we found some of her things," Miller said, choosing his words with agonizing care. "But Maya isn't there, and neither is the suspect." On the other end of the line, the sound of hope shattering was audible, a silence so profound that it felt like the end of the world. The nightmare had escalated. They knew who had taken her. They knew what he was capable of, but they had absolutely no idea where he had gone. The days following the raid on the abandoned warehouse blurred into a sickening loop of anticipation and disappointment for Maya's friends and family. The adrenaline that had fueled their initial search efforts had crashed, replaced by a heavy, suffocating dread that settled over the apartment like a physical weight. Chloe spent her days staring at the silent landline, jumping at the slightest sound, while Jessica and Liam continued to plaster the city with missing posters, though their movements were now mechanical and devoid of hope. The media interest began to wane as the news cycle moved on to fresh scandals. leaving Maya's story to fade into the background noise of the city. A forgotten tragedy in a metropolis that never stops moving. Detective Miller, however, had not stopped moving, and the forensic evidence from the warehouse finally yielded a name that turned the investigation into a manhunt for a known predator. Fingerprints lifted from the soda cans on the table matched those of Elias Thorne, a 34-year-old drifter with a history of aggravated stalking and violent assaults. Thorne was a ghost in the system, a man with no credit cards, no fixed address, and a terrifying skill set acquired during a brief stint in the military. He knows how to live off the land, and he knows how to disappear. Miller told the terrified group, which means we aren't just looking for a criminal, we are tracking a survivalist. The terrifying reality of who they were dealing with was compounded when the police tech team managed to salvage a fragmented data file from Maya's smashed smartphone. It was an accidental voice recording, likely triggered when the phone was thrown during the initial struggle or transport, lasting only 12 seconds. Miller played the audio for the family in a closed room, warning them that what they were about to hear would be distressing. The recording was mostly static and the rumble of a car engine, but in the background, a muffled, terrified whimpering could be heard. Then, a calm, deep voice cut through the noise, chillingly clear. "Stop crying. Maya, we are going to the quiet place now." That phrase, "the quiet place," sent shivers down the spines of the investigators because it hinted at a premeditated destination, somewhere far removed from the chaos of Los Angeles. Using cell tower triangulation from the last ping of the phone before it was destroyed, the police traced Thorne's trajectory heading north, straight toward the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Mojave Desert. The investigation abruptly shifted from the dense urban jungle to one of the most desolate landscapes in America. Search teams, accompanied by cadaver dogs and helicopters, were deployed to a sector of the desert known for its abandoned mines and harsh, isolating terrain. The search operation in the desert was a grueling, nightmarish endeavor that tested the psychological limits of everyone involved. The heat was blistering during the day and freezing at night. The landscape, a monotonous sea of scrub brush and dirt that seemed to stretch on forever. Volunteers walked in grid patterns, poking at mounds of earth with sticks, dreading what they might find beneath the surface. For 3 days, the desert offered nothing but silence and dust, mocking their efforts to find a single human being in thousands of square miles of emptiness. It felt as though the earth itself had conspired with Thorne to keep his secrets hidden. On the 4th day of the desert search, a canine unit picked up a scent near a cluster of rocky outcroppings several miles off the main highway. The dogs led the handlers to a small, makeshift campsite tucked away in a ravine, invisible from the road and shielded from aerial view. The fire pit was cold, the ashes long since settled, but it was clear that someone had stayed there recently. Detective Miller arrived on the scene, his boots crunching on the dry earth as he approached the fire pit. Sifted among the gray ash were remnants of fabric, charred and brittle, but the color was unmistakable, a vibrant, deep crimson red. Forensic analysis confirmed within hours that the fabric scraps were polyester, matching the material of the dress Maya had been wearing the night she vanished. The discovery was a devastating blow that brought the search team to a standstill, the implication hanging heavy in the hot desert air. He burned her clothes, Miller whispered to his partner, staring at the evidence bag, which means he stripped her. Or he didn't finish the sentence. But the thought was shared by everyone. Thorne was systematically destroying evidence, erasing Maya piece by piece. The presence of the clothes without a body was a psychological torment, leaving her fate suspended in a terrifying limbo. Despite this breakthrough, the trail from the campsite went cold, as the wind had swept away any tire tracks or footprints leading out of the ravine. Thorne had moved on, likely days ago, penetrating deeper into the wilderness or doubling back to civilization in a different vehicle. The sense of hopelessness among the search party was palpable. They were chasing a phantom who seemed to be taunting them with crumbs. The vastness of the desert felt overwhelming, a giant haystack where the needle was constantly moving. Back in the city, Chloe and the others received the news of the burned dress with shattered hearts. The tiny flame of optimism finally extinguished. Weeks turned into a month. and the case began to freeze over, destined to become another cold file in the LAPD archives. The police scaled back the active search, lacking any new credible leads to justify the manpower. Elias Thorne had vanished as effectively as smoke in the wind, and Maya was nowhere to be found. The friends stopped meeting as often, the shared trauma becoming a barrier rather than a bond. Each of them retreating into their own private grief. The apartment felt like a museum to a lost life. Maya's room untouched, a shrine to a girl who had simply walked into an alley and never walked out. Then, just as the detective was preparing to file the paperwork to suspend the active investigation, a phone call came in from a rural sheriff's deputy in Nevada, 300 miles away. A hiker had found something strange in an old, boarded-up cabin deep in the woods, not a body, but a collection of Polaroid photographs tacked to a wall. "You need to see this," the deputy said, his voice trembling slightly over the line. "One of them looks like the girl on the news, and she's alive in the picture." It was the spark that reignited the entire world. A final, desperate chance to uncover the truth before it was too late. The drive to the remote cabin in the Nevada woodlands was a race against the clock that felt agonizingly slow for Detective Miller and the tactical team. The location was deep in the backcountry, accessible only by a dirt road that wound through dense pine forests and rocky terrain, far removed from the nearest town. The Polaroid photos found by the hiker were the smoking gun they needed. They showed Maya bound and terrified, but undeniably alive. Inside what looked like a root cellar, Miller knew that Elias Thorne was likely escalating, documenting his crime, and that if they didn't breach that cabin within the hour, the outcome would shift from a rescue mission to a body recovery. When the team finally positioned themselves around the perimeter of the rotting wooden structure, the silence of the forest was deafening. There was smoke curling from a chimney, indicating someone was home, and a vehicle covered in a tarp was parked around the back. "We go in hard and fast. Do not give him a second to react," the SWAT commander whispered into his headset, his eyes locked on the front door. At the signal, flashbang grenades were deployed through the windows, shattering the glass and filling the cabin with blinding light and disorienting noise. The team surged in, weapons drawn, shouting commands that echoed through the small, cluttered space. Elias Thorne was found in the main room, scrambling toward a hunting rifle leaned against the wall. But he was tackled to the ground by 3 officers before his fingers could even graze the weapon. He fought with the feral intensity of a trapped animal, screaming obscenities and spitting at the officers. But he was quickly subdued and handcuffed. "Where is she? Where is the girl?" Miller demanded, grabbing Thorne by the collar and hoisting him up to face him. Thorne just smiled, a chilling, dead-eyed expression that sent a wave of nausea through the veteran detective. "She's in the quiet place," Thorne rasped. "She's already gone." Panic surged through Miller as he frantically scanned the room, looking for the trapdoor or entrance to a basement that the photos had hinted at. He spotted a rug in the corner that looked out of place, slightly bunched up as if moved recently. He kicked it aside to reveal a heavy wooden hatch secured with a rusted padlock. "Get the bolt cutters," now he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. While an officer snapped the lock, Miller prayed silently, preparing himself for the worst. The door was flung open, revealing a dark, damp hole in the ground that smelled of earth and decay. Miller descended the rickety wooden ladder first, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom of the underground root cellar. In the corner, curled into a tight ball on a filthy mattress, was a figure that barely looked human anymore. It was Maya. She was emaciated, covered in grime, and trembling violently, her eyes squeezed shut as if waiting for a blow. "Maya, it's the police. You're safe now," Miller said softly, holstering his weapon and holding out his hands. She opened her eyes slowly, and the look of sheer disbelief and terror that washed over her face was something Miller would never forget. The moment they brought Maya out of that cabin and into the sunlight was a mixture of triumph and heartbreak. She was alive, a miracle in a case that had pointed toward death at every turn. But the vibrant young woman who had walked into that alley was gone. She was airlifted to a trauma center, where she was treated for severe dehydration, malnutrition, and extensive physical injuries. Her friends, Chloe, Jessica, and Liam, rushed to the hospital, breaking down in tears when they saw her frail form in the hospital bed. The reunion was not like the movies. It was quiet, filled with hesitant touches and the heavy weight of a trauma that words could not fix. Elias Thorne was charged with kidnapping, torture, and attempted murder, facing a mountain of evidence that included the photos he had taken himself. During the trial, the details of his quiet place emerged. It was a delusion he had nurtured for years, a twisted fantasy of possessing someone completely in isolation. He sat emotionless as the verdict was read guilty on all counts. Sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, he would die in a concrete cell, a fitting end for a man who tried to bury a young woman in the earth. But for Maya, the sentence was just the beginning of a long, painful road to recovery. In the years that followed, Maya retreated from public life, moving back to her small hometown in the Midwest to be with her family. She never returned to Los Angeles, the city of dreams, having turned into a landscape of nightmares. She underwent years of therapy to process the weeks she spent in darkness, eventually finding the strength to speak quietly about her experience to help other survivors. She wrote a book, not about the crime, but about the resilience of the human spirit, dedicating it to the friends who never stopped looking for her. Her survival was a testament to hope, but her scars were a reminder of the evil that lurks in the shadows. This case serves as a terrifying reminder of how quickly the trajectory of a life can change based on a single, mundane decision. A shortcut taken to save 10 minutes resulted in weeks of horror and a lifetime of healing. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that safety is often an illusion, and that predators like Elias Thorne are out there, waiting for a moment of vulnerability. We walk past alleys and dark corners every day, assuming we are safe. But as Maya's story proves, the line between a normal walk home and a fight for survival is razor thin. Thank you for joining me on this harrowing journey into the disappearance and rescue of Maya. It is a story that keeps me up at night, a reminder to always trust your instincts and look out for one another. If you found this story compelling, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more dark and mysterious tales. Stay safe, stay aware of your surroundings, and as always, I will see you in the next one.